I used to think silence could fix anything. If I stayed calm, if I worked harder, if I proved myself long enough, people would see who I really was. But that morning in court, when my father pointed at me in front of everyone and said I'd never served a single day, something inside me broke clean. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. It was the quiet certainty in his tone, the kind of voice that makes strangers believe him before I even open my mouth. I'd spent years earning the right to be proud. And in one sentence, he stripped it all away. The worst part wasn't the lie. It was how easily he said it, as if my life, my years, my name, were nothing but a story he could rewrite. That was the moment I stopped trying to be understood. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just looked at him and thought, "You have no idea what this silence is about to cost you." The courtroom smelled like old wood and nerves. Light bounced off the polished floor, sharp and cold, slicing through the silence that hung between the benches. Every sound, the shuffle of papers, the creak of chairs, felt louder than it should have. I sat at the defendant's table, my palms pressed together so tightly they left marks on my skin. Across the room, my father stood as if he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. The same man who once taught me how to hold a wrench now looked at me like a stranger he'd caught stealing his name. He spoke slowly, his voice rough from years of cigarettes and stubbornness. "She never served. She's been faking it for years." The words hit harder than any blow I'd ever taken. My throat tightened, but I kept my chin up. Around us, even the hum of the air conditioner stopped meaning anything. The judge looked at him, then at me, like he couldn't decide which version of the truth belonged in his courtroom. My lawyer's hand landed gently on my shoulder, a silent warning. "Stay still, don't react." But the silence burned worse than anything I could have said. My father's gaze never met mine. He stood straight, delivering each accusation like a man reading scripture. My brother Levi waited behind him, his eyes fixed on the floor, already choosing his side. The judge's gavel cracked once, short and final. "3 days," he said. "Bring me proof." When I stood, my knees barely held. Each step echoed down the marble hall, hollow and cold, until it no longer sounded like footsteps, just the slow collapse of something I thought would never break. The sound of drills was the rhythm of my childhood. In Abilene, everything smelled like oil, sweat, and pride. My father's shop, Collins Auto Repair, wasn't just where engines were fixed. It was where he measured what made a person worth a damn. Work hard, don't whine, don't stop. That was his gospel. He was a man carved from Texas dust, steady hands, sharp temper, and a voice that didn't know how to bend. He believed a man's worth came from what he could build or break with his own hands. Tears had no place in that world. Neither did weakness. My mother, Evelyn, was the opposite. She spoke softly, like she was afraid to disturb the air. She'd hum while washing dishes, the same tune every night, as if to smooth the noise coming from the garage next door. She spent her days in the town library, surrounded by stories, ones where people learned, changed, and forgave. I don't think my father ever opened a single book. He loved to tell the story of how he almost became a pilot. "They lost my file," he'd say, wiping grease from his hands. Could have been an Air Force man if not for that. I must have heard it 100 times before I found the truth, an old form tucked in a drawer. Its words faint but brutal. Medical rejection, heart arrhythmia. I never asked him about it. I just folded it back where I found it and stared at my hands, the same shape as his. That night, something shifted. I stopped seeing him as untouchable and started seeing the cracks he spent his life welding shut. When I told him I'd enlisted, he laughed through a drag of his cigarette. "You? You'll quit before boot camp's over." My mother just wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "Don't let the world measure you by someone else's broken dream." He didn't come to the bus station. The sound of a hammer clanging against metal was his goodbye. Later that night, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice trembled. "He burned your photo, but he stared at it for an hour before he did." That image stayed with me. The man who taught me to be strong, sitting in the glow of his own resentment, holding a picture until it hurt too much to keep. For years, I tried to convince myself it was anger, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. It was grief, the kind that comes when someone else lives the life you never got to. The first thing I learned at Kadena Air Base was that silence could be louder than any order. The second was that no one cared who you were before you got there. Days began before sunrise, with the hum of engines rising like thunder under metal roofs. I worked logistics, coordinating transport routes, keeping planes moving, making sure the right cargo reached the right place at the right time. No medals, no spotlight, just precision and pressure. One summer night in 2013, a storm rolled in over the Pacific. The radios were alive with static, every call half drowned by wind. Then a voice cut through, 2 airmen missing after a transport drop gone wrong. I was on comms duty. My hands moved without thought, rerouting signals, patching frequencies, barking instructions I didn't even know I remembered. Maintain line, 2 down, keep breathing. 3 minutes later, the rescue crew confirmed contact, both men alive. The storm didn't calm for hours, but inside that tiny room filled with flickering lights, everything went still. In the morning, the report mentioned it in one line: exceptional composure under pressure. No names, no commendation. Just another entry in a file no one would ever read. Senior Master Sergeant Dale Merritt found me later, leaning against the doorway with a paper cup of coffee. Not everyone's bravery comes with a medal. Collins, some comes with silence. I smiled, thinking it was just something old soldiers said to make you feel seen. I didn't know how much weight that sentence would carry in my life. When my service ended, I came home expecting a handshake or maybe just a quiet nod. My mother cried into my shoulder, whispering she was proud. My father didn't even look up from his paper. So what now? You done pretending you're one of them? I didn't answer, because by then, I'd already learned the only language that ever worked in our house. The kind of silence that keeps you standing, even when no one believes you belong. 3 days after the first hearing, the sun over El Paso burned white against the concrete. I stood outside the courthouse, watching people clutch folders to their chests, as if paper could protect them from shame. Inside, the air smelled like ink and tension. I placed my own files on the table, my DD-214, my commendations, my verification letters from the Department of Defense. My lawyer, Ellis, looked up at me and said softly that paper could never compete with pain. My father wasn't fighting for money. He was fighting for pride. He sat across from me, flanked by his attorney, Richard Harver, wearing the same stubborn expression I'd grown up with. Harver slid a document forward, stamped in red. Draft investigation, unresolved. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was an internal review from 10 years ago, dismissed and sealed. My father's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. If you were truly innocent, why was there ever an investigation? I didn't answer. Words meant nothing here. Paper had replaced truth. I left the courtroom dizzy, the heat biting into my skin. Outside, Levi waited, arms crossed. You did this, I said. He didn't flinch. I just wanted everything clear. You can't blame Dad for wanting proof. Proof. As if family needed evidence. By afternoon, the judge granted a recess to verify records. I knew it was a tactic. Drag it out until I broke. That night, I sat in my car staring at the document until the letters blurred. I tore it down the middle, the sound loud in the still air. My phone buzzed. A message appeared from an unknown number. He's wrong about you. Don't give up. D.M. Dale Merritt. My old commanding officer. The name hit me like breath after drowning. For the first time in weeks, I let the silence inside me turn into resolve. A few nights later in Colorado Springs, a letter waited in my mailbox. The return address read Okinawa, Japan. My hands trembled as I opened it. I remember that night in 2013 it said, "You stayed on the radio while everyone panicked. That's not something I forget. Beneath the letter was a small USB drive. I plugged it in and pressed play. Static filled the room. Then the storm, wind, shouting, and my own voice cutting through it. Maintain line. 2 down. Keep breathing. 10 years dissolved. I could smell the salt, feel the metal walls shaking. Then came the final call. We got them. Both men alive. My throat closed as tears slipped down my face. The next morning, Ellis studied the letter. This could end everything, she said. But are you ready for him to lose? I didn't answer. I knew she was right. If I won, something in my father would die that no verdict could fix. At the next hearing, Dale Merritt walked in, posture straight, voice calm. I served with Ms. Collins. She coordinated the Kadena rescue. I have records. He handed the USB to the clerk. The sound filled the courtroom again. My voice, the storm, the proof. For once, no one doubted what they heard. Harver leaned forward. Mr. Merritt, did she ask you to falsify this? Merritt's jaw tightened. Service records don't lie. People do. The words cracked the room open. Levi's face went pale. My father's hand trembled on the table. When the judge called recess, my father came close enough for me to smell the tobacco on his jacket. You've got your witnesses now, he said. But you'll never have my respect. I met his eyes. I stopped needing it when you started fearing it. He froze, turned, and walked away. For the first time, I didn't feel small in his shadow. The silence that followed didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to me. By the third hearing, the courthouse was packed. People came to see what the papers called the veteran and her father's war of pride. Cameras flashed outside while the Texas sun poured through the glass, white and merciless. Inside, I sat beside Ellis, who quietly read through her notes, her calm the only thing holding me together. The judge called the session to order. The door opened, and a tall man with gray hair stepped inside, posture straight as if the years hadn't touched him. Your Honor, Senior Master Sergeant Dale Merritt, retired. I request to testify. My father's voice sliced through the room. He's not on the witness list. The gavel cracked once. Bench trial rules. I'll allow it. Merritt walked to the front, opening a fireproof envelope stamped Air Force Logistics Command. These are backup copies of records lost in the 2014 Missouri fire, he said. The judge plugged in a drive, and the speakers came alive with static. Then my voice, steady, younger, cut through it. Maintain line. 2 down. Keep breathing. The sound froze everyone. My father's face drained. Levi looked at the floor. When the audio ended, the judge checked the code, then said one word. Authentic. My father shot to his feet. She's manipulating old friends. That recording proves nothing. The judge's tone hardened. Mr. Collins, one more word and you're in contempt. Merritt didn't flinch. Sir, when your daughter was keeping 2 men alive over that radio, she wasn't pretending. She was serving. The silence afterward felt holy. When court adjourned, Merritt shook my hand. Honor is a chain, he said. When one link is attacked, the rest must hold. Outside, Levi waited by the steps. Dad asked me to find the report. I didn't think he'd use it like this. You thought wrong, I said. You let him destroy the only thing I was proud of. That night, Levi called again, voice trembling. He's not well. His heart's acting up. I sat in the dark, the glow of my phone fading. The truth had survived the fire, but somehow, all of us had been burned. By evening, I was back in Abilene. The sky hung low, the air heavy with dust. The sign for Collins Auto Repair swung weakly, one corner missing. Inside, my father sat in his old chair, staring at a dead TV. Levi lingered by the door. You called? I asked. You won, he said. It's not about winning. Everything's about winning. You wouldn't understand. You never lost enough. I stepped closer. You lost yourself trying to protect your pride. His voice rose. Don't talk to me about pride. You think that uniform made you better? No, I said. But pretending you could have done it made you smaller. He froze. The anger slipped away. leaving only pain. They told me I wasn't fit to serve. I never told your mother. Then you did it. I hated you for succeeding where I failed. He sank back into his chair. I didn't lie to hurt you. I lied to survive myself. You hurt me anyway, I whispered, but I'm still here. He looked up, eyes wet. Why did you come? Because you're still my dad. Levi stepped forward, holding an envelope, Mom's handwriting. She said it was for when pride gets in the way. I opened it. If you ever forget how to love your daughter, remember this. She carries the strength you wished you had. My father's hands shook as he read. I reached out and took one. Bravery doesn't always wear a uniform, he murmured. And pride doesn't always mean strength, I said. The light through the window faded to gold. The war between us ended in silence. No apologies, no winners, just two people finally unarmed. A week after that afternoon in Abilene, the rain came light and steady across the highway back to Colorado Springs. The world outside blurred into gray, the kind of weather that made memories louder than the engine. Everything had ended in court, but the real reckoning was still unfolding inside me. By late afternoon, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Levi stood on the porch, soaked through, holding a small wooden box against his chest. He didn't meet my eyes. Dad found this in Mom's closet, he said quietly. She wrote something, for both of you. We sat at the kitchen table, the light from the window falling gold across the wood. Inside the box were two envelopes, her handwriting steady and familiar. One for me, one for him. I opened mine first. If your father ever doubts you, remember, fear often wears the mask of pride. Be patient. You carry the courage he once dreamed of. My father opened his next, his hands trembling. If her strength reminds you of your own failures, let love remind you of who you wanted to be. Forgive yourself, Walter. Then you'll be free to love her again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped the glass, soft and rhythmic. My father finally lifted his eyes, voice breaking. She saw both of us clearer than we ever saw ourselves. I nodded, my throat tight. She always did. Levi's voice was barely a whisper. She wrote them 10 years ago, right after you enlisted. Like she knew this would happen. My father reached across the table, his fingers shaking as they found mine. I can't undo what I did, but I want to understand. If you'll let me, I will, I said. But it'll take time. I have time, he murmured. His tears came quietly, not from guilt, but from release. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing away the noise, leaving only the sound of peace trying to find its way back home. 3 months passed, and winter settled deep into Colorado. The Rockies were wrapped in white, the air sharp enough to sting. The world had gone quiet again, quiet in a way that no longer hurt. I spent my mornings at the Veterans Support Center, helping families who were still trying to find their footing after war. I never expected one of them to be my father. That morning, he walked through the door wearing his old brown jacket, hat in hand, eyes lowered like he was stepping into a church. I want to sign up, he said slowly, for the VA family program. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The man who once mocked everything military was now asking to learn how to understand it. He sat in the back during the first session, silent as others shared stories about not recognizing the people their children became after deployment. By the second week, he raised his hand. I accused my daughter of lying because I couldn't face the truth about myself. Pride can turn love into something unrecognizable. The room fell still until an older veteran nodded. You're not the first father to lose a war after the war. After the meeting, I walked beside him to the hallway. How did it feel? I asked. He exhaled, harder than any confession I've ever made, but lighter too. That evening, I checked my email. Levi had sent a photo of his kids holding a sign that read, "Welcome, Grandpa. He's coming to visit this weekend." The message said, he wants to make things right. Before closing time, my father stayed behind to help me stack chairs. He picked up the folded flag resting on the table, his voice quiet. You ever miss it? The Air Force? Sometimes, I said, but I don't need to wear the uniform to remember who I was. He nodded, eyes softening. I wish I'd learned that sooner. We didn't speak again. We didn't need to. The silence between us, for once, meant peace. April sunlight spilled across the park in Colorado Springs, pale and gold against the morning air. Flags rippled along the lawn, their movement quiet but certain. When the announcer read the names of those being honored, I barely listened until mine came. Ms. Harper Collins, U.S. Air Force, Logistics Division. Applause rose and fell like a tide. I looked toward the back rows and saw my father stand, slow but steady. He wore his brown jacket and a small pin that read, Family of Veterans. When our eyes met, he lifted the wooden box, the one that held my mother's letters, now framed beneath glass. No words passed between us, but I understood everything he meant. After the ceremony, we sat on the porch, the Rockies soft in the distance, the last traces of mist melting away. You were brave long before the uniform, he said quietly, and you were proud long before you admitted it. I answered. He smiled, his voice trembling. Guess your mother was right again? She usually was, I said, and we both laughed. Then came silence, gentle, unbroken, enough to hold forgiveness. Families can fracture and still be whole. I closed my eyes and let the wind carry what was left of the storm.